Hi, I'm Christie Townsend, Director of Content and Research here at Kaya, and I'm here to talk to you today about competition for capital. For those of you who have already read our report, Innovation Unleashed, The Rise of Total Portfolio Approach, you already know that there are four legs to basically implementing TPA. And those are governance, culture, the implementation of a factor lens, and in my opinion, one of the more important ideas when it comes to the actual implementation of the investment program, which is competition for capital. So, competition for capital, as many of you know, is basically the idea that each unit of capital invested is required to earn its place in the portfolio. This is typically done by ensuring that each marginal dollar is deployed into the team's best ideas and based off of the opportunities available that also meets the needs and constraints of the actual investment program. This is not a groundbreaking or even unique concept when it comes to investing. However, in my experience, it can be tricky to integrate in a way that is both effective and doesn't leave you open to unintended risks. So it's kind of interesting because in the wake of our report, I had a number of peers in the industry reach out with what I thought was some really thoughtful feedback. Specifically, one refrain, that I heard repeatedly was that a certain level of, how do I say, we follow the traditional endowment model, but we're also investing in best ideas. So how is that really different from TPA? And I actually understand where this is coming from because in the endowment model, often the team does actually speak about best opportunities and best ideas, but really the main difference starts in how you view portfolio structure. So first of all, to start, when you think about your investment process, if it's centered around a specific asset class or bucket with specific target allocations to each of those buckets and narrow ranges of any kind, then you've already run afoul of the total portfolio approach. With that said, I think that there's a level of confusion because pure endowment model investing versus total portfolio approach can feel like this really stark black and white binary decision. However, in my opinion, and while my take isn't a purist view, I tend to view the endowment model and TPA on more of a continuum. So maybe even a yin and a yang, if you will, versus that binary decision. So by this, I mean, if you look at this continuum and you put pure endowment management on one side, so as we generally think about it, that includes, management of a large pool of capital invested based on a strategic asset allocation that's approved by a board. Hopefully not, but usually it's based off of data that's, 30 years backward looking. And, beyond that, the team tends to be siloed. I think that's another big one. And with a CIO who owns that kind of competition for capital style decision. In this case, however, investing is done solely through the lens of asset allocation. However, and this is the big caveat that I think confuses a lot of people, even in this highly endowment model structured state, many investment teams, at least in my opinion, the ones that do it right, still periodically employ a look-through analysis of some kind to basically drill down beyond those asset classes and make sure they're not making those unintended bets or risks. In other words, to make sure that what they're actually holding is in line with that kind of top-line asset allocation risk return metric. Again, this view may not be perfect, but then again, on that continuum, on the other side, you have TPA, which invests on that kind of look-through level, in my view, and then may or may not periodically do a top-down filter through the lens of a more traditional asset allocation. So again, to me, no matter which side you're on, whether that be pure endowment or pure TPA, wherever you start from, that analyzing the data through the other approach, I think is a really powerful way to cross-check your portfolio, and thus why I kind of look at it as a yin and yang. So with all of that said, I think a lot of the head scratching from US-based endowment professionals in particular is that it's rare to have an organization that just functions purely under the endowment model. And by that, I mean, they're actually different, kind of, how can I say, segments or so, in that, for example, endowments under $5 billion are typically run by teams that are smaller. So this requires the team to have a more generalist, unsiloed approach to investing. And their organizations tend to kind of, filter that through to their investment portfolio decisions. So it is pretty likely that, especially on the smaller endowment side, the organization does feel a little bit more TPA-like. So with all of that said, I think that there's a lot of good takeaways, kind of wherever you fall on how you view the spectrum. I think that there are a lot of great ways to implement and a lot of great ideas you could take from TPA, particularly when it comes to the kind of idea of capital competition within your organization. So I think one of the absolute best ways is to follow a more generalist model. So don't break your investment team down by asset class, and encourage everyone to really find best ideas and not just kind of what fits into their bucket. I think the second is to make sure that you're regularly employing a portfolio look through that goes beyond asset allocation. And really, third and most importantly, in my opinion, endowment leadership needs to empower their entire team with what we consider on the US side typically a more traditional CIO thought process when it comes to portfolio construction. I think this is actually huge from a mentorship standpoint because it enables your team to think like a CIO, which is such a powerful learning experience early on, and I think only goes to help the portfolio. So again, I can see where there are some US-based endowment organizations that feel like they're already kind of doing TPA. I think that this is, kind of a misleading idea if you start anywhere from asset allocation. However, if you want to think about being more TPA-like, absolutely employ a generalist model. Really think about look through analysis as you're making your decisions. And then again, most importantly, empower your team to make the best decision when it comes to portfolio construction.